We're out on the boat on the Bosphorus today. It's the second day of Eid, which is the celebration at the end of Ramadan. It's so crowded that we decided to take the boat because you actually cannot drive a car in Istanbul today. We had to walk down here, but I'm glad. This is a beautiful setting. The setting for this river is what has made this city. And it started as a little Greek city called roughly Byzantium. And then in come the Romans, and they take over. They set up their capital here, moving from Rome here to what became Constantinople with the Emperor Constantine. And this is the gateway between the Black Sea up north, the only way to get up there to Russia and other countries up north, and come down and get to the Mediterranean. And so this gigantic city is on both sides of the river. One side is Europe, the other side is Asia. And then, of course, the Ottomans come and they take over and have the civilization roughly that turns into what we have today. But because of where it is, it's this really important powerhouse place that really built this nation. And it's just beautiful. I was thinking about, after just a few days here, if I have to say, what do I think about Turkey? Because I've never been before. And I'd say it's everything. It's everything together. With all the civilizations, there's little bits of this and that in the food, in the architecture. You can say, well, that's sort of European. This is kind of Mediterranean. And then here's something we've never had before. I guess that's Turkish. And it's really kind of cool to see that reflected in the faces of the people, to see it in all the different kinds of foods. And one of the things that touched me most, of course, was the first day of Eid. We went for the special prayer at the end of Ramadan. So everyone's been fasting for an entire month during the day, and that's hard work, actually. And everyone came to the beautiful mosque, and we're all praying together. And I'm used to hearing the imam calling out the call to prayer, but at one point, all of the hundreds and hundreds of people who were there all start saying along with him that God is great, God is one. And just to be there with that many people all unified with that thought and that sentiment, it was just incredibly moving. And so it's a mixture of this big bustling city that feels like any other big city, but yet at the same time, everyone stopping, coming together after this whole month where almost everybody observes the fast, and then having this religious moment to kind of rededicate themselves for the coming year and to do the things that are already part of Islam, to care for the poor. And I just thought it was very beautiful. I loved the chance that we had to be there. On In Good Faith, we'd say, what do you think, and what's your experience with seeing God in your life, or the effect that your faith has on your life? So here we are in Turkey, where especially the end of Ramadan, like we just have been, everywhere you look, you see the effect of faith, not only on individuals, but on the entire country, as people kind of in a unified way come together to observe. I guess it's sort of, you could say in some ways, like Christmas time in the US, where everywhere you look, there's some evidence of the particular holiday. And I just think that's really beautiful. And usually we're in a studio, we're having a guest drop by, or we're on the phone with someone somewhere in the world. But this was pretty special to be able to come here and be where people are not talking about back home and someplace far away. We're there in the mosque at the end of the prayer. And then we got the chance to talk to children. Little children came up to us. They had put together bags with candy, and they were just sharing it because that's part of the celebration. And so to really be in touch with people and get to speak with them individually, that was really nice. One of the best parts of this celebration of Eid for these couple of days at the end of Ramadan is this huge focus on family. And there are huge crowds downtown, but it's not because people are unhappy with things, it's because they're all getting out with their families. They finished the whole month of fasting and everybody wants to celebrate. Free transportation today. Everybody's grabbed their kids and they've all come down to look at the mosque. They've just opened the Blue Mosque after about 5 years of restoration. People want to just be part of it and all be together. And so that tradition of doing things with your family is a really cool feature of Islam, but also of the culture here in Turkey. People come and they have picnics in the park, and it's just nice to see people doing all of that together. Traveling around Istanbul for the last couple of days, we've been able to see everywhere you look evidence of something very modern and sleek and covered with glass, these business buildings. And then you turn the corner and there are the original city walls of Constantinople that the Ottomans repaired after the Romans had let them ruin as they declined. And everything that you look around and see, from towers to minarets added to what were ancient basilicas, so from a church to a mosque, it's just pieces put together in layers. And so you just see everything coming together from all the people who've lived here over the centuries. I have been so lucky to travel and go to a lot of different places, both as a performer or as a guide. And I've also been lucky to be in certain places when things were being observed or celebrated. In Sri Lanka, for instance, in Kandy, a town up in the mountains, they have the Temple of the Tooth. They have a relic from the Buddha. And they will parade that on the largest elephant in the whole parade of elephants and hundreds of drummers. Everybody comes out and you just get swept up and you get to be part of things with everyone. Then there's things like in Jerusalem going to the Western Wall. The temple is gone. That Western Wall is not what remains of the temple, it's what remains of the platform the temple was built on. And you see people coming to regard that as the holiest place in their faith, as close as they can get to the Holy of Holies that once was there. There are times when you get to see people really come together in their faith, and I love the chance to be a part of that, to respect their tradition, and then to ask myself too, why has that lasted for thousands of years? There was something to it, something that connects people with a divine spark that lasts. And that is something also that we can pass on to our children. And I love those connections. I love seeing that with other people because it makes me then look in my own life and say, what am I passing on? What are the ways that I connect, not just with my kids, but what are the communal things? Because I think that's an important part of faith. You can't just do it all on your own. You actually need other people to be able, I want to say, to practice on. And they're practicing on you. We practice on each other and learn how to be the people that we want to be and that we think God wants us to learn to be.
So Steve, you've traveled so much, and some people might say that you're out there searching for something. And what inspires you to search, and what do you love about the search?
When I was a kid, I think it was, I want to go everywhere just because it would be cool. But I think there was actually something deeper, because the older you get and as you start recognizing things when you go someplace and you like something about the people, or now you've got a friend in Israel, or you've got a friend in France, or wherever it might be. And then you start thinking, why are they that way? And faith is a huge part of it in every civilization. There's no faith that doesn't say, essentially, the golden rule: treat people the way you want to be treated. And so I think there's something deeper than just, I want to travel everywhere, to now it's, I want to know the people everywhere and what makes them tick. And I always hear something new every time you talk to a new person.
Yeah.
They've got some little story about what happened in their life and how they leaned on their faith, or maybe later looked back and thought, I didn't realize it, but God was leading me. I love hearing those. That encourages me in my own spiritual quest.
I think one of the things that's really interesting about travel too is we have these assumptions about people in different places, and we essentially assume they're all the same, right? Oh, if I get to Turkey and it's 98% Muslim, that means everyone is, right? So what are some of those things that you've realized as you've traveled? This is cultural and this is actually faith-based. What are some differences you've kind of uncovered?
I think especially here, we're in the Middle East, I see such instant care for anyone who has some disability, for instance. Often I see, for instance, in the States, in the big city, if someone is blind or if somebody is in a wheelchair, sometimes people sort of shy away like, well, I don't want to be rude, I don't want to intrude. My experience in the Middle East is if somebody is going along and they see someone needing help, they just rush to them. There are times, for instance, looking in the Garden of Gethsemane, taking a tour group there, and I had a tour member who was blind. Everybody rushed to take him, and they opened the gates to the 2,000 and 3,000-year-old olive trees. And they wanted to be sure he had the experience we were having with our eyes. They took him over and let him put his hands on the trees and see how big they were and feel the shape. I love that about this culture here in the Middle East. Just that instant, there might be a need, and how can I help you? How can I be hospitable?
Yeah.
And I want to be that way.
Amen.
Amen. That one was a little less sublime.
In this beautiful setting, ancient and modern all at the same time. What do you wish people knew back home about this place? What's the one thing you really want to convey?
I would like people not to be afraid of each other. And we see things on the news, and it's always the sensational things. When I take a tour to the Middle East, people very often will say, oh, I just don't know if I could ever go there. I have friends in the Middle East who I say, you should come stay with me if you come to the States. And they say, oh, I would never go to the States. And I say, why? And they say, have you seen the television? It's dangerous. And, you know, they're thinking of certain detective shows a lot, but also what gets in the news is often just the extremes. When you meet the people, then the fear melts away. And so I wish people knew you could come here and you can have friendly interchanges and you can just enjoy the world that we live in. I don't know if I'm ever happier than when I'm in an airport and I hear 6 different languages and I can't speak them. I almost feel like, dang, I've got to go home and learn whatever that is. I can't. I don't have time to learn all the languages, but those little moments. I remember standing in an airport in Brussels and feeling a tag on my sleeve. And it was, I think they were maybe 4'6". This row of nuns, turned out they were from Peru, and they couldn't figure out where to go, and they didn't speak the language, but I suppose I looked unthreatening enough, unimposing enough that they ventured to just hold up their ticket and say. And so I did that. I feel very emotional about this. I felt really honored that I had this moment and that they would pick me and that it could have been somebody else, but I got to be the one to help them find their way to their gate and reassure them. And we didn't even speak the same language, but I was just pointing out numbers and sort of giving them a metaphorical pat on the back. And I left and I thought, what just happened to me? Because I just felt like the Grinch whose heart had grown 3 sizes. I was happy all day because I got to have that interchange, and somebody's life was a little bit better because we had that little moment together. So you've been the producer for In Good Faith now for about a year.
Yeah.
And you may have had an idea what you were getting into, but what has surprised you, or what have you seen about what can happen on the show where we just talk to people about their faith experiences?
I mean, one of the things that was so welcome to me and that I didn't know was going to happen is I had so many moments as I was listening to interviews and you know, doing the engineering for them, and you were interviewing people where I would just be overcome with recognition. Recognition of an experience somebody had, or recognition that I needed to hear this and I needed to think about what I was hearing. And yeah, like I had the first year was just me like, blinking back tears as I like looked at the volume control and decided what if that was working or not. And I'm really grateful for that, and I'm really humbled. I'm the kind of person who, for a long time, thought, well, maybe God is the clockwork maker, right? Maybe he is off doing his thing, and I'm just supposed to be trudging along down here. And I had this real sense that, oh, I found this place for you to be right now. And I've just been really grateful about that. Yeah, there's some ideas from our interviews that have stayed with me. This idea of that it's not about belief, really. Belief or faith, maybe those words are overused in English, and maybe what we need to think about is using the word of trust in God and loyalty to God and a conversation with God and openness to God. And that's been a really important idea for me.
Here's one of my favorite things, too. I used to hear about interfaith work, and I think I was confusing that with ecumenicalism, where we'll all sort of get rid of our differing beliefs and find some common core and basically water down what we believe. But in actual interfaith work, what I've discovered, and I've just heard it said by rabbis and imams and others, that they feel actually strengthened in their own faith as they work with other people. And again, people lose fear, they gain respect, and I think it's really great. We can work together on something and actually be strengthened in our own tradition by interacting with people from other traditions.
So tell me about a time that you've actually done this. I mean, I've heard this on the show a lot. It's about people coming together and solving a problem in the community that they see. So when's the time that you've been able to do that with folks?
There is a little A-frame church in downtown Provo. It's the Provo Community Congregational Church in the city where I live. And they need a new roof, or they needed a new roof. And they are definitely in the minority, and they're surrounded by a majority faith. But what we were able to do is, I started singing in the interfaith choir with my wife.
Yeah.
And we had a great time there. We loved the music we were singing. But then we started hearing about the needs because we practiced at that building. And so we were able to say, there's this website, justserve.org, and you can say, we have this need or we have this project and we're doing something this day. Come help us out. And they had people show up. And it was really cool to be able to help make that connection, which I only knew about because I was singing in the choir that practiced there and got to interact with people who weren't of my faith.
Right. And that's so central, right? If we don't get to know each other, we can't help each other. And I mean, we talked about on this trip, we had a little conversation about the golden rule. Sometimes the golden rule doesn't actually help the other person because you're so busy thinking, well, I would want it this way, right? But if you actually get to know people, you know what they do need and what they do want.
What they actually need,
yeah. I think that's really important. So, you've talked to so many people about their practices, about their beliefs. How has that impacted your own practice?
I think it's increased my trust. I worry less about things. I actually think I have more faith because of exposure to more people of faith, even though they were different traditions. I just hear about ways that in people's individual lives God is working. That tells me he's working in my life too. And that as insignificant as I might be, or as petty as some little problem might be we're solving in our family, I just have this underlying trust that something is holding us all up. I don't
Yeah.
know how else to call it.
Yeah.
And that when I don't know how things are going to go, I can relax into that. And that's faith. It's not knowing, but it's trust.
So I've met people who say they're spiritual, not religious. I've also met people who say I'm definitely religious, but not very spiritual, which is an interesting take, right? They like the tradition, they like the community,
Yeah.
they like the structure. And so it might be something about personalities there. But for you, why is religion important?
I think if you look at any tradition that has stuck around for thousands of years, there's a reason it stuck around. People can argue about, was there an actual ark? Were there actually two of each animal, whatever it might be? And there's something to learn from that. And then there are others who say, if we follow God, he'll carry us through. I think you can believe either one of those ways of interpreting scripture, but there is wisdom there that has come from God, I believe, and that in one way or another has been put into print, which is actually kind of also a miracle that you can transfer experience just by making a few scratches on on some paper or whatever it might be. I think that there's wisdom in those traditions that's worth holding on to and worth learning from. And that we expand ourselves when we hear a verse from the Quran or from the Bhagavad Gita, whatever it might be, and think, actually, that really does apply to me too.
Yeah.
It's divine wisdom that's put down and shared. And I think that's one of the really important traditions, is being guardians of that wisdom in all the different faiths. You grew up with influence of lots of different traditions.
Yes.
In your ancestry and family. And then you also had at some point to go through this process of, do I believe this? And were you young? Were you older?
Are you talking about when I joined the church? Is that?
Well, or when you just realized, I think God is a thing? Or was that always?
I don't think that was ever a question. Yeah, so I have family that are evangelical. I have family that are Church of the Brethren. I have family that are Jewish. I have family that are, from all over the world, from usually due to marriage. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting is everybody sort of had a belief, and I was nurtured by that. And so when I went on my own sort of, I want to find what's true. I think it was looking for that community and that tradition and that security. I often talk about how my own conversion in my teenage years pretty much saved my life, because there was just lots going on that I don't think I would have survived without some good old-fashioned religion to train me up in the way I should go. And so I always knew, and I think my journey now is about, I love the community that's adopted me, but I also want us to be thinking about how we can reach out to others. And so, yeah, I've always believed. I don't know if I've always trusted. That's a hard one. I told you about my childhood. That's a hard one, the trust part. But I've always believed.